I never thought the day would come when my own wife would challenge me like I was some contestant on a twisted reality show. Yet, there she was, leaning against the kitchen counter in our suburban home in Austin, Texas, her arms crossed, and that smirk that used to make my heart skip now slicing through me like a knife. She looked at me, her eyes bright with some reckless excitement, and said words I'll never forget. "I want to date other men, and I want you to fight for me if you think you can." I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. I laughed because it had to be some cruel joke, some test I wasn't prepared for. "You want me to what?" I asked, my voice trembling but trying to keep it calm. My mind raced, trying to understand if this was a breakdown, a dare, or the beginning of a nightmare I wasn't awake enough to recognize. She didn't blink, she just stared, her smile growing sharper. "I want to see if you really love me," she said. "I want to see if you're willing to fight for me, or if you'll just let me go." Fight for her? The idea sounded absurd. Marriage wasn't supposed to be a competition. Love wasn't supposed to feel like a battlefield. And yet, here I was, my chest tightening, my head buzzing with memories of every fight, every late-night conversation, every promise we had whispered in the dark. Was all of that meaningless now? The morning sunlight streamed through the half-open blinds, casting lines across the hardwood floor like some silent jury judging me. I sank into the kitchen chair, gripping the edge like it could hold me together while my mind spun. My wife, my partner of 7 years, was asking me to compete for her attention, to chase her, to win her back from men I didn't even know. And the worst part? A small, irrational part of me felt intrigued. Not because I wanted to fight for her, but because for the first time in years, I realized I had no idea who this woman was anymore. The woman who used to send me goofy selfies at work, who used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings with flour on her nose, the woman who had cried with me when my father passed, she was gone. And in her place was someone I barely recognized, someone dangerous and thrilling, someone untouchable. I stood up, trying to steady my shaking hands. "Are you serious?" I asked again, hoping the words might make her realize the insanity of what she'd just said. She nodded, dead serious. Her tone was calm, almost casual, as if she had rehearsed this moment for months. And maybe she had been building up to this game without me even knowing. I wanted to scream, to plead, to beg her to stop, but instead all that came out was a whisper. "Why?" She tilted her head, eyes sparkling with mischief. "Because I want to see if you're the man I married, or if you're just comfortable." The word cut deeper than I expected. Comfortable. That's all I'd been. Comfortable enough to stay, to provide, to smile at her jokes even when my heart wasn't in it. I felt a flash of anger, sharp and burning. And yet, even as I burned with frustration, I felt a pulse of something else, exhilaration. Because beneath that challenge, beneath the cruelty, was the undeniable fact that I loved her. And maybe, just maybe, I was willing to risk everything to prove it. She walked toward me then, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She stopped just inches from my face and whispered, "You know you can't just ignore this. You can't just walk away." I swallowed hard. I could feel my pulse in my throat. The rules of this game were insane, unspoken, unwritten. But if I walked away, I lost. If I stayed and tried, I risked humiliation, heartbreak, and betrayal. And yet, I couldn't walk away. "Fine," I said finally, my voice low, almost a growl. "If this is your game, then I'll play." Her smirk widened, satisfied. "Good," she said, "because it starts tomorrow." The next day arrived with the sun high and scorching over our Texas neighborhood. She left the house with a kiss on my cheek that felt like fire on ice, and a text pinged on my phone. "First challenge, you know the rules." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. The message didn't explain anything, just like her. And that was the thing. The uncertainty, the danger, the thrill, it was all part of her plan. My mind raced as I tried to anticipate what she would do. Did she want me to confront these other men? Show jealousy? Or did she want me to disappear and make her chase me? I spent the day pacing the living room, replaying every memory we'd shared. I remembered the first time I told her I loved her in the coffee shop on 6th Street in Austin. I remembered her laughter on our wedding day, her tears when we bought our first house. And I remembered the quiet nights when it was just the two of us, her head on my chest, both of us falling asleep to the sound of each other's heartbeat. And now, all of that felt like it had been tested, challenged, thrown into some twisted arena where only the strongest, or the smartest would survive. By evening, I got my first hint, a text from an unknown number. Had dinner with Emily, she mentioned you. Cute guy, but will he fight for her? My stomach dropped. Emily, one of her friends, someone I barely knew, and suddenly the challenge wasn't abstract anymore. It was real. She was out there, exploring, teasing, seeing if I would react. And I had to decide, would I chase? Would I fight? Or would I let her go and admit that maybe the woman I loved was no longer mine to claim? I felt the walls closing in, the tension unbearable, the betrayal sharp and relentless. And yet, deep down, beneath the hurt and confusion, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't sure I wanted to stop. Because part of me wanted to win. Part of me wanted to prove that love wasn't just comfort. That devotion wasn't just routine. That I could rise to the challenge she had laid before me. I didn't know how it would end. I didn't know if I would succeed or fail. All I knew was that the first move had been made and the game had begun. And in that moment, as I stared at the dim glow of my phone, the unknown number blinking like a heartbeat in the darkness, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing in my life would ever feel safe again. The following morning, I woke up to a quiet house, but the silence felt heavy, almost oppressive. My wife was gone, and the faint scent of her perfume lingered like a taunt. I poured myself a black coffee, my hands trembling slightly, staring out the window at the tree-lined street that had always been comforting, now feeling alien. Every neighbor jogging, every dog barking, every car passing felt like a reminder of the game I had unwillingly been thrown into. A text pinged on my phone before I could even sip. Challenge 2, you have 1 hour. Make her notice you today before she disappears again. I stared at it, my chest tightened. My mind raced. Notice her? How do you notice someone when they're already intentionally avoiding you? When every glance, every laugh, every movement she makes is calculated, like part of some cruel experiment. I knew I had to act. I knew hesitation would be my enemy. I grabbed my jacket and headed out, heart hammering in my chest like a drumbeat of war. Every street corner, every cafe, every place she might show up felt like a potential battlefield. And the thing about love is that it makes you desperate in ways you never imagined. Desperate enough to follow a woman you've known intimately for years, like a stranger, because she dared you to. The first hint came at the coffee shop on Congress Avenue. A familiar laugh carried across the street, and my stomach twisted. It was her, my wife, sitting at a table with a man I didn't recognize. I could see her perfectly from across the street, the sunlight catching her hair just right, her hand brushing against his in a way that made my blood boil. I hesitated. I thought about turning away, about going home and pretending none of this was real. But something deep inside me wouldn't allow it. I walked in, forcing my calm as if it were armor, and ordered a coffee. I kept my eyes on them, pretending to scroll through my phone. She noticed me almost immediately. That smirk appeared again, the one I used to adore but now felt like a challenge. Her eyes flicked toward me, just for a second, and I saw it. The spark, the test, the thrill. She was daring me to react. I took a slow breath, pretending casualness, and walked toward the counter. As I passed their table, the stranger's eyes followed me, wary. I smiled politely, nodded at him, and turned to my wife. "Morning," I said, my voice steady but loaded. She looked up, her smirk softening just enough to remind me why I loved her so fiercely. "Morning," she said, like it was a greeting but also a battle cry. The stranger shifted uncomfortably. I noticed him tense, and I realized that's what she wanted, me to dominate without words, to make her decision obvious. But I didn't know how to play this. Love isn't supposed to be a contest. "Coffee?" I asked, gesturing toward my drink. She shook her head, playful, teasing, testing my patience. I sat a few tables away, keeping her in my line of sight. Every laugh she shared with him stabbed me like knives, and yet I couldn't look away. I remembered the nights we stayed up talking about nothing, the plans we made for a future we were supposed to share, the quiet comfort of her head resting against my shoulder. And now, all of it felt like a fragile illusion, one that could shatter at any moment if I didn't act correctly. Hours passed. She left the coffee shop, the stranger trailing behind her like a shadow I wasn't allowed to touch. My heart pounded as I followed, careful not to be obvious. She walked through the downtown streets with confidence, her presence commanding attention, making me feel invisible yet completely exposed. Then came the first confrontation, the unexpected twist that would set the tone for the rest of this torment. She stopped outside a small boutique, turned to me, and said, "If you really want me, you're going to have to take a risk." "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep calm, trying not to let anger or desperation leak into my voice. "Catch me before he does," she said, and then, like a flicker of fire, she disappeared inside the store, leaving me standing in the street with my jaw tight and my blood racing. I ran, not because it was a literal race, but because it felt like it. Every step I took was fueled by adrenaline, fear, love, and rage all mixed into one. I burst into the boutique and found her trying on sunglasses, looking at herself in the mirror with an almost careless charm, unaware, or pretending to be unaware, that I had followed her. "Gotcha," I said, my chest heaving, my heart in my throat. She turned slowly, a glimmer of victory in her eyes. "Not yet," she said, laughing softly, and that laughter was the kind that made you love someone despite knowing they were about to break your heart. By the time I left that store, drenched in sweat and adrenaline, I realized something terrifying. I was fully immersed in this twisted game, and I was willing to go to extremes to prove my love. The next few days were a blur of challenges, each more humiliating and intense than the last. She arranged encounters where I had to compete for her attention without her actively participating: coffee dates, bookstore runs, even a local concert she attended with other men, all while I maneuvered like some shadowy figure desperate for recognition. I caught glimpses of her laughing, flirting, teasing, and each time I felt the sting of betrayal. But I also felt a deep, undeniable pull. My mind raced, analyzing her every move, anticipating her desires, strategizing my own responses. Love, I realized, had become a battlefield, and I was not retreating. One night, after a particularly exhausting day of these orchestrated challenges, I returned home to find her sitting on the porch, the Texas sunset painting her silhouette in gold and crimson. She didn't speak at first. We just sat, the silence heavy but intimate. And in that moment, I understood something crucial. This wasn't just about competition. This was about testing the limits of our connection, exposing truths we hadn't faced in years. "You've changed," she said quietly, not accusing, just stating. "And you," I replied, my voice low, almost a whisper. "Are you the same woman I married, or someone I'm only starting to know?" She smiled softly, a mixture of pride, mischief, and vulnerability. "I want to know if you can handle me, all of me." I looked at her then and realized I didn't have a choice. I couldn't step back. I couldn't give up. Because even as she pushed me, teased me, and challenged me in ways I had never imagined, I still loved her. And love, I finally understood, was never comfortable. It was messy, terrifying, exhilarating, and sometimes a battlefield where the stakes were your heart. That night, I made a decision. I would play her game. I would chase, fight, and prove that I was not someone who could be ignored or replaced. I didn't know if I would win, but I knew one thing: I would never stop trying. And as I lay awake that night, listening to the distant hum of Austin traffic, I felt a mixture of dread and excitement. The game was far from over. The challenges were only beginning. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive, not just surviving, but fighting for the woman who had once been my everything and now dared me to earn her all over again. The next morning, I woke with a sharp edge to my thoughts. My mind wasn't focused on coffee or emails or the mundane rhythm of life. I was replaying every glance, every laugh, every smirk from the day before. The game she had set in motion was consuming me, dominating my thoughts like wildfire. And the terrifying part, I couldn't stop it. I didn't want to. She sent the first text of the day at 9:03 a.m., simple and cold. "Challenge 3, you know the rules, don't fail." I stared at it, feeling my stomach knot. The rules were always vague, never spelled out, leaving me to guess her intentions. Was it a confrontation? A test of my confidence? A dare to prove that I could be the man she still wanted, or the man she never truly knew? I found her at the park near Lady Bird Lake, sitting on a bench with a book in her lap. But she wasn't alone. A man, broad-shouldered and clearly attentive, leaned in to talk to her. My stomach dropped as I walked closer. My pulse pounded. Every instinct screamed to storm over, confront him, demand her attention, but that wasn't the way she played. She wanted this to be strategic, psychological, not brute force. I approached slowly, pretending to jog by as if I were just passing through. She looked up, caught my gaze, and my heart sank and soared all at once. That smirk, the one that had once made me laugh, now a razor-sharp reminder of how deep her game's cut, was there. She waved subtly, almost teasing as if to say, "Are you awake enough to fight for me today?" I knew then that subtlety wouldn't be enough. I had to make her notice me without her having to force it, so I acted. I casually picked up a basketball lying near the court and began shooting hoops. Not directly at her, not aggressively, but skillfully, every shot calculated to catch her attention. She watched, and I saw it, a flicker of intrigue, a spark that told me I was on the right track. The man beside her shifted uneasily. He sensed my presence, even if he couldn't put it into words, and that, I realized, was part of the thrill, dominating her attention without saying a word. After what felt like an eternity, she closed her book and stood. She walked toward the lake, letting the wind catch her hair, turning it golden in the morning sun. The man tried to follow, but I moved strategically, cutting him off with a casual but confident stride. She glanced at me, a mixture of delight and surprise flashing across her face. "You're persistent," she said, her voice soft but carrying weight. "I could say the same about you," I replied, my tone calm, but every word loaded with emotion. She laughed lightly, a sound that made my chest ache. "I don't make it easy for you, do I?" "No," I admitted, "but I'm not giving up." The man beside her coughed awkwardly, a subtle intrusion into our moment, but she ignored him. And in that silence, I realized something powerful. I wasn't just fighting for her attention. I was fighting for my sense of self, for the love I had invested in her for years, for the truth of our connection. She moved closer, tilting her head, her eyes scanning mine like a puzzle she wanted me to solve. "Do you really think you can handle all of this?" she asked. I swallowed hard, feeling a lump form in my throat. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I'll try." Her smile softened, but it was still edged with challenge. "Good, I want to see if your love is real, not comfortable, not easy, real." And just like that, the man beside her stepped away, unsure, perhaps realizing that he was no match for the storm that was our history. She turned fully toward me, and in her gaze, I saw something I hadn't expected: vulnerability. A crack in the armor she had worn so carefully. "Meet me tonight," she whispered, almost a command, almost a promise, "at the old pier." I nodded, my heart racing, my mind spinning. The old pier, the place we had first kissed, the place where we had shared secrets and dreams, the place that had always been ours. And now, she was using it as a stage, a battlefield, a testing ground. I spent the day in a haze, unable to focus on work or responsibilities. Every hour stretched into an eternity as I anticipated the evening, rehearsing my approach, analyzing her intentions, imagining the worst, preparing for every possibility. By 7 p.m., I was in my car, driving with my hands gripping the steering wheel, my pulse racing in sync with the thrum of the engine. The pier was quiet when I arrived, bathed in the warm glow of string lights she had left on, casting a romantic, almost cinematic ambience. She stood at the edge, her back to me, looking out at the water. The wind caught her dress, flowing around her like a whisper, and my chest tightened painfully. I stepped forward. "Hey," I said softly. She turned slowly, her eyes locking onto mine. "You came," she said, a mixture of relief and challenge in her tone. "I promised I'd play your game," I replied, "no matter what it takes." She smiled, almost sad, almost triumphant. "It's not just about showing up," she said, walking closer. "It's about proving you can handle what comes next." I nodded, feeling a storm of emotions, anger, desire, fear, love, all intertwining. "I'm ready," I said. She studied me, her eyes searching, her lips parting slightly. Then, suddenly, she took my hand and led me down the pier, stopping at a spot where the water reflected the lights like liquid gold. She turned to face me, her expression serious now, stripped of teasing. "Do you know why I set this all up?" she asked quietly. "Because I needed to know if you'd fight for me when the world or I became unpredictable. Because love isn't just comfort. It's chaos, it's challenge, it's survival." I swallowed hard, realizing the weight of her words. "I'll survive," I said. "I'll do whatever it takes." Her eyes glistened, and I noticed the faint tremble in her hand as she reached for mine. "It's not about survival," she whispered. "It's about understanding. about trust, about whether what we had is still alive. The water lapped gently beneath us, the night air crisp and full of tension. And in that moment, I knew she wasn't testing me for games or amusement. She was testing the very foundation of our love. And I was willing to go to the edge, to fight through heartbreak, betrayal, and uncertainty, to prove that what we had was worth more than fear. I stepped closer, my forehead resting against hers. "Then I'll prove it," I said. "Not for you, not for the game, for us, for everything we've ever been." She closed her eyes for a moment, and I felt the faintest shiver of vulnerability pass between us. "Good," she breathed, "because the real test isn't over yet." And with that, the third challenge had ended, not with triumph or defeat, but with the realization that our love was being stretched to its absolute limits, and neither of us would ever be the same again. The next morning, I woke with a tight knot in my chest. Sleep had been fleeting, haunted by visions of last night. The pier, the water reflecting her silhouette, her words, her touch. I could still feel the tremor of vulnerability in her hand, the soft weight of her forehead against mine. But beneath it all, a darker realization settled in. This wasn't just a test of love. It was a game of control, of power, of who could bend whom first, and I wasn't willing to break. The text came at 10:17 a.m. Challenge 4. Tonight, bring everything you have, don't disappoint me. Everything I had. The words burned in my chest, reverberating like a taunt. She didn't want me to react casually anymore. She wanted total commitment, emotional reckoning, and perhaps revenge in disguise. My pulse thumped, each beat a reminder that I was already deep in her twisted world. The day dragged, each hour stretching impossibly long. I drove aimlessly through the streets of Austin, trying to think, trying to strategize. Part of me wanted to confront her directly, demand honesty, and tear the veil off this twisted game. But another part, an irrational, desperate part, was drawn to the challenge, fueled by the thrill and terror of losing her. By evening, I knew exactly where she would be. The upscale rooftop bar where we had celebrated our 10th anniversary of dating. The same place where she had first whispered about her dreams of traveling the world, and where I had nervously promised I'd always be by her side. Memories collided with tension, nostalgia clashing with anger. I arrived early, scanning the room. She wasn't there yet, but I could feel her presence as if she were already controlling the energy of the space. My phone buzzed again. "I'm here, find me." I moved through the crowd, eyes searching for her. And then I saw her, standing near the edge of the balcony, dressed in a flowing emerald dress, the city lights reflecting off her hair. But she wasn't alone. A man, tall, confident, leaning close, whispering something that made her laugh. My stomach twisted. The fight instinct in me ignited. I couldn't let him have the space, the presence, the moment. I approached with measured steps, exuding calm control, though my blood was racing. Her eyes found mine mid-laugh, and that smirk appeared again, the same one that had haunted me for days. "You're late," she said softly, though her lips curved in amusement. "I'm right on time," I replied, my voice steady, though the tension coiled like a spring inside me. The man shifted awkwardly, sensing the energy between us. I knew then that this wasn't about confrontation with him. It was about proving to her, and perhaps to myself, that I could reclaim the space she had dared him to occupy. She leaned closer, her eyes locking onto mine. "Remember," she whispered, "it's not about strength, it's about presence, about proving who belongs here." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. She wanted me to fight emotionally, to show her I was indispensable, to make her feel the pull of our shared history. And I realized something terrifying. I loved her enough to play by her rules, even if it meant walking through humiliation, tension, and emotional fire. Minutes passed like hours. I remained composed, standing near her, smiling casually, engaging with the bartender, the guests, but always keeping her in my line of sight. Every laugh she shared with him, every tilt of her head, every glance, was a challenge I had to overcome without showing desperation. And then it happened. She leaned in, pretending to whisper something to the man beside her. He smiled, oblivious to the fact that every word, every gesture was part of a challenge. My jaw tightened, my hands clenched. I stepped forward, voice calm but commanding. "Excuse me, can I borrow her for a moment?" The man froze, realizing this wasn't casual banter. He stepped back reluctantly. And in that split second, I felt the power of presence, of claiming what was mine without arrogance, without force, simply by existing in the same space with intention. She turned to me, eyes wide, a flicker of surprise passing over her face before the familiar smirk returned. "Bold," she whispered. "I'm persistent," I replied, taking her hand. We stepped toward the balcony, the city sprawling behind us like a glittering battlefield. The lights reflected in her eyes, and I could see a storm of emotions: pride, mischief, vulnerability all at once. "You've changed," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "Not just in the last few days, but since we met. There's fire in you now, but can you handle what's next?" I swallowed hard. I can handle anything if it's us. Her gaze softened for just a moment, and I saw the woman I had married, the one who had once trusted me completely, who had once been my partner in every dream and fear. But it was fleeting. The smirk returned, sharper, teasing, challenging. "I hope so," she said, and then she turned, walking to the edge of the balcony, the wind catching her dress, tossing her hair like a banner of defiance. "Because tonight, the final challenge begins." My heart skipped. Final challenge? I had been fighting for days, each moment draining me emotionally, mentally, physically. And now, she was raising the stakes higher than ever. I followed her to a secluded rooftop corner, away from the crowd. The lights of the city below shimmered, the hum of distant traffic mixing with the pulse of my racing heartbeat. "You've been following me, haven't you?" she asked, her tone both teasing and accusing. "I have," I admitted. "Everywhere, every step. Not because I have to, but because I want to, because I still love you." Her eyes glistened, and I saw her struggle, between the thrill of control and the vulnerability she rarely allowed herself to show. "Love isn't enough," she said softly. "It's never enough. You have to fight, not just for me, but for yourself." I nodded, understanding finally that her game wasn't cruelty, it was a mirror. She was showing me the chaos of our love, forcing me to confront my own fears, my own complacency. And I realized something terrifying. I had been so comfortable in our marriage that I had forgotten how to fight for it. I stepped closer. "Then consider this fight started," I said, voice steady. "I'm not walking away, no matter how hard you push me, no matter how much you test me." She smiled, a dangerous, beautiful smile that made my pulse spike. "Good," she said, "because tonight you'll either prove yourself or lose me forever." The wind whipped around us, carrying the distant sounds of the city. And in that moment, as her hand rested briefly in mine, I understood. Love wasn't comfort. It wasn't safety. It was chaos, fire, and challenge. And I was ready to dive into it completely, even if it meant being burned. The night was electric. The Austin skyline stretched out like a battlefield beneath us, and I could feel the weight of every challenge she had thrown at me these past days pressing on my shoulders. Every laugh, every flirtation, every cruel test had led to this moment. And as I stood on the rooftop with her, I realized the final truth. This wasn't just her game, it was our reckoning. She looked at me, eyes sharp, heart-stirring, almost untouchable. "This is it," she said, her voice low, a whisper that carried the gravity of everything between us. "Prove to me, once and for all, that you deserve us, that you're not just comfortable, that you're alive." Alive? That word reverberated inside me. I thought of every night we had spent together, every memory, every tear, every laugh. And I understood I had to risk everything, not just for her, but for myself, for the truth of our love. I took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline pulse through me, and stepped closer. "I don't need to prove anything to anyone else," I said, voice steady, eyes locked on hers. "I just need to show you that I will never stop fighting for you. Not tomorrow, not next week, not ever." Her smirk softened, but there was still that edge of challenge. "Words are easy," she said. "Actions, that's what matters." I nodded, "Then watch this." I took her hand, and for a moment, the chaos of the past days, the flirtations, the betrayals, the challenges, faded. It was just us. Just the two of us standing on the edge of a rooftop, with the world sprawling beneath us, and the unspoken truth between us hanging heavier than any words. "You've changed," she said quietly. "I've seen it. The way you move, the way you think, you're not afraid anymore. And that terrifies me in the best way." "I'm not afraid," I said. "Not of you, not of this game, not of losing, because I finally understand something. Love isn't about comfort. Love isn't about control. Love is chaos, fire, risk, and devotion. And I will burn for it if I have to." Her eyes glistened, tears threatening the edge of her lashes, and I realized something profound. She had wanted me to fight, to prove myself, to step fully into the raw, unfiltered love that we shared. And in the process, she had reminded me who I was, who we were, and why we had fallen in love in the first place. The final challenge, I realized, wasn't about competing with other men. It wasn't about tests or dares or games. It was about truth. About confronting the parts of ourselves we had hidden, the fears we had buried, the complacency that had quietly crept into our marriage. I drew her closer, holding her tightly, feeling the warmth of her body against mine, and whispered, "I don't need to win anyone else. I just need to fight for us. Always." She rested her forehead against mine, her breath mingling with mine, and for the first time in days, I saw her completely. Not teasing, not challenging, not testing, just her. Vulnerable, beautiful, alive. "You finally get it," she whispered, a tremor in her voice that made my chest ache. "You finally understand what it means to love fully." "I do," I said, "and I always will, no matter what." We stood there for a long moment, the city humming beneath us, the wind carrying the distant sounds of life, and I realized that the battles, the tests, the betrayals, they had all brought us to this. Not broken us, not divided us, but made us stronger. Then she pulled back slightly, looking into my eyes, a playful glint returning. "You've survived everything I've thrown at you," she said, "and yet, I still might make you fight for me again tomorrow." I laughed, a deep, relieved laugh that felt like it carried the weight of weeks of tension. "I'm ready," I said, "always ready, because love is worth every risk, every test, every heartache." She smiled, a real, unguarded smile, and in that moment I knew something had shifted. The game had ended, not with a winner and loser, but with a recognition of the truth between us. That no matter the chaos, no matter the uncertainty, no matter the betrayal we had endured or orchestrated for the sake of love, we were still here. Together. Fierce. Alive. "I can't believe it," she whispered, laughing softly, her hand tracing mine. "I thought I'd lost you to fear, to comfort, but you fought with everything you had." "I never left," I replied. "Not even when it hurt the most. Not even when it seemed impossible. Not even when you challenged me to the edge of my own sanity." Her eyes softened, shimmering with emotion. "I pushed you," she said, "to see if you'd break, to see if you'd run, to see if you'd stop loving me." "And I didn't," I said simply. "Because love isn't about avoiding pain, it's about facing it together." She pulled me into a fierce, lingering kiss. A kiss that spoke of forgiveness, desire, and the kind of unshakable bond that only survives when tested by fire. I felt her fingers threading through my hair, her body pressed to mine, and I realized that every challenge, every heartbreak, every test she had devised had led to this moment. The wind whipped around us, the lights of the city sparkling below, and I finally understood. The game had never been about her proving me right or wrong. It had been about awakening a love that had been dormant, about reminding us both that passion, intensity, and vulnerability are the foundation of any relationship worth fighting for. "I love you," I whispered, the words raw, unpolished, and true. She smiled, tears finally spilling over. "I love you too," she said, "and from now on, no more games, just us." I held her tighter, breathing in her scent, feeling the rhythm of her heart against mine. The rooftop, the city, the chaos, it all faded into the background. There was only us, only the truth, only the fire that had tested us and ultimately made us unstoppable. And in that moment, I knew something undeniable. Love wasn't safe. Love wasn't easy, but it was worth every challenge, every betrayal, every terrifying test we had faced. Because in the end, love that survives fire is unstoppable. We stayed there for hours, talking, laughing, crying, and holding each other as the city slept beneath us. The battles, the challenges, the games, they were over. But the love we had reclaimed, the bond we had proven unbreakable, would last a lifetime. And as I watched her lean her head against my chest, feeling the rise and fall of her breath, I knew one final truth. No one could ever take her from me. Not fear, not challenge, not betrayal, because love that fights never loses.